Welcome to Smalltalk Daily for Friday, April 24th, 2009. This morning I thought I'd take a look at ActiveRecord and the API you use if you want to use it directly as opposed to kind of the implicit usage that Web Velocity uses. And this is appropriate for any application, whether it's Web Velocity or you're doing something that doesn't involve a front-end web form directly, or whether it's VisualWorks or whether it's Object Studio. If you're using ActiveRecord, I'm going to walk through how you use this to dump ActiveRecord objects in and out of the database. So to do that, let's go to a class I've got in here. And this Media Finder class, its purpose in life is to grab a BOSS file, iterate through the objects, and dump them into the database. And that's because this is how I'm populating my test database. So it's kind of a nice, simple illustration of how you set up your login to Glorp and then how you go ahead and use the ActiveRecord object. So let's go in here to set default login. It turns out that if you go to class ActiveRecord, look at the class side, you can hand it a default schema and a default login to use. And in Web Velocity, that information is stored in the package, but you can create this login object in any way you want. If you go and look for class login, so for instance, if I type in here login and just hit return, you'll see that I get these things here: create default login, colon. So that'll tell me that these APIs exist, and I can go ahead and browse through and figure out how that works. But there's a class called login in the system, and you can just create an instance of that and then do all of this stuff, assuming you have a schema set up. So that's how you set the defaults. Once you've done that, let's go over to our domain object. I have a class called media, which is one of my domain objects. And if I go to the visibility, you'll see that the way this works is I've got ActiveRecord directly and then persistent object. Let's go up to ActiveRecord for one and look at the visibility. It turns out that there's not a whole lot here in ActiveRecord other than setting some defaults for logging in. What you want to do is go one level up to persistent object, and this is where most of the APIs you would use on an ongoing basis exist. So on the instance side, once you've got an instance of an ActiveRecord object, like this media object we're looking at, you tell it to be persistent, and then once you've got the whole chain of objects that you've told to be persistent, you take any one of them and send commit unit of work, and that will throw everything you've made persistent into the database. If that was a mistake, you can tell it to roll back. And of course, if you grab one in particular that's in the database, you can send it delete and it'll go away. So that's the basic simple API you use. Let's take a look at how that works. Let's go to a different class entirely. I've got class loader, and this again is part of my little populate the database thing. And the reason this is useful is that I can go ahead and look at something that shows you how to use this in action. So I'm creating from my non-database objects ActiveRecord instances. So I'm creating a tag, and as I create them, I tell them be persistent. But you notice here I'm not committing anything, and that's because as I create my media objects and I create my tags, I need to tell each one to be persistent. But then when I finally get to the point where I want to dump them into the database, and that would be in transform entries right here, you notice I'm iterating through creating new objects from this collection that I passed in from BOSS. And then each one, as I go through, I tell it be persistent, and then further down, when I'm done creating all my media objects, all my tag objects, and I'm ready to put everything in the database, I grab any one of them, tell it commit unit of work, boom, off it goes into the database. So that's basically the pattern. Go ahead and log into Glorp using the schema and the login credentials. Once you've got a session, you can grab any ActiveRecord object, tell it to be persistent. Once you've told all the ActiveRecord objects that you're interested in to be persistent, take any one of them, tell it to commit unit of work right here, and then you're ready to go. Everything will go into the database and it'll all be persistent. So pretty simple to use, pretty basic, and that's about it for today. Until next time, have fun with Smalltalk.